Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Mind Shepherd. Because if we don't shepherd our minds, nobody will, and our thoughts will go astray like sheep gone astray. So, today we're talking about justice, which is so important to talk about because we all want justice, but sometimes people seek justice and get themselves into more trouble. So let's talk about it more deeply so that we can avoid that. So the question isn't whether justice is important or not. It's more of a question of moderation because we cannot live in a world where no judgment is the norm because we do have to make the right decisions in the right moment in life. It is a fact. It's not like your decisions have no consequences. And we cannot live in a world where we're like, well, we are all sinners, so no judgment, right? Because that doesn't work out either. And the opposite, which is judge everybody, is also detrimental because, those kind of generalizations are by nature unfair. Judgment is also very individual. You cannot condemn all people of a certain race or a certain nationality or anything because one of them did something wrong. That is unfair. So being too judgmental is the root also of fundamentalism, and we do not want that. So we're going to have to do something more uncomfortable, which is talking deeply about justice. So the main issue with justice in our modern world is that hating somebody for many people is enough reason to wish them the worst out of justice, right? But that is not how justice works. Justice is blind. It doesn't like or dislike anybody. It is a neutral yet powerful force. And we have to think more deeply about justice because in our hunger for justice, people are manipulated all the time. Like, let's slander that person, or let's hate that person, or, you know, people turn justice into a force to strip people out of their dignity instead of the opposite, which is it should restore dignity. In other words, if we don't analyze justice more deeply as a society, we will just continue to be harvested like, you know, plants or animals out of our anger so that other people benefit. And that is not what we want. We want real justice. Another issue of justice in our modern society is that many people want to take justice in their own hands. And in my experience, it is never safe to do that. Because if you seek to harm another person out of justice, you're only making yourself another perpetrator. It's always safer and smarter to put justice in the hands of the appropriate mechanisms of justice. Because we see it all the time, right? People who have been truly hurt by others and they take justice in their own hands and they end up in a worse tragedy than they were before. So we need to be sober if we want to get justice. So here's the bad news about justice. It is that rarely do people get the justice they want. Justice may happen, but rarely do people get to see it in a way that it is concrete and real as they want to see it. And that drives a lot of people crazy because many humans need to see justice happen to regain their peace and knowledge that balance exists in the universe. But by the same coin, we can turn it into something positive. Because if you don't believe that justice exists, you will always be on the lookout for something that you will never be able to find. But if you believe that justice exists, It is a good question to ask yourself. Do you believe that justice exists? And if you do, then at least you don't become a socially resentful person, a cynical person, skeptical. You know, if you choose to believe that justice will work itself out, then at least you will rest assured and in peace that you do not have to become a vigilant person because you were hurt. And you remain powerful and strong in spite of whatever happened to you. Another thing to consider about justice is that sometimes justice is happening. We are just maybe unable to see it. Think about it. If somebody is guilty and, you know, deserving of justice, they're not going to go around, hurt and showing their suffering to everybody. Because if they did, that means that they would be, facing what they did internally, and guilty people rarely do that. Instead, they put on a mask that everything is perfect, that they are a valuable part of society, or that they have everything together. So we have to keep that in mind regarding justice, that sometimes, since things are not as they seem, we may not see justice happening, but that doesn't mean that the person who hurt us isn't in a prison of guilt of their own making. Another aspect we must consider about justice is that we are not all knowing as human beings. How do you know the exact amount of justice that another person deserves? What if it is more? What if it is less? So we have to be very humble and careful and not get carried away, because if we make a wrong decision of justice about other people, we might become guilty ourselves. And here's another truth about justice. When we want justice, what we want is to recover our sense of dignity, of peace, of safety in the world. And unfortunately, even if all of the justice systems in the world give you the justice you want, that doesn't mean that you will recover safety, dignity, or a sense of freedom, that everything will be okay. That is something you have to do from within. So, what I'm saying is that the most important justice you need is the justice you can do right now, which is letting yourself be happy in spite of whatever happened to you, letting yourself feel safe again, letting yourself live freely in spite of whatever hurt you. That is the biggest justice. And if you think about it, if somebody tried to harm you, that is what they wanted to take away from you. And it is something that only you can restore. And here's the most important thing I can say about justice from personal experience. Don't let people who hurt you turn you into a vengeful, hurt, and resentful person. Don't let your desire for justice turn you into them, because that is what they want. They want to steal your humanity. They want to steal whatever light you have and turn you into them. But if you resist that and you preserve your light in spite of whatever happened to you, that is the ultimate justice. Because if you can do it, why couldn't they? That reveals that innocence is a choice we all have. Nobody has to hurt anybody else. And that is ultimate justice served.